Distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Deakin University's Melbourne City Centre and to this inaugural Deakin Policy Forum. I'm David Lowe, I'm Director of the Alfred Deakin Research Institute at Deakin, and I wish to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathered today. We pay our respects to them for their care of the land. Now I'll be handing over to Michael Porter very quickly to introduce today's forum. But I'd just like to say a few words about the Alfred Deakin Research Institute, which is now almost 3 years old and therefore is sufficiently mature to be known by many according to its acronym, ADRI. Always a good sign, I think, when you're known by your acronym. ADRI's headquarters is at the beautiful Geelong Waterfront campus, but we have a presence at all of Deakin's campuses and we love using this new, very attractive facility in Melbourne. Our mission at ADRI is to conduct excellent research into problems of high importance and to promote public debate and the development of well-informed public policy. From our foundation in the humanities and social sciences, we also build multidisciplinary teams with colleagues in health and physical sciences, as suggested by key research questions. ADRI currently comprises nearly 50 academics at Deakin, including research-only scholars and teaching and research academics. We're enjoying success according to the university's measurement of success, largely in terms of high-quality publications, research grants won, and PhD students completing, but we want to do more in relation to public debate and informed public policy aspects of our mission. In recent times, we've held, in partnership with DFAT and AusAid, a major conference on Papua New Guinea, which will follow with an even bigger one next April, a conference on the growing phenomenon of public diplomacy in India and Australia, in partnership with the Australia-India Institute and the Indian Ministry of External Affairs, and we've held forums on topics such as migration and on religion in Australian public life. We've got a number of plans, including forthcoming events on Australia and the nuclear energy option coming up next year. But more immediately, we're delighted to host, with Michael Porter's guidance, the Deakin Policy Forums. We hope that you find this initiative stimulating and timely. To my mind, the need seems clear. Universities should be catalysts for conversations about the bigger questions that lie before us and the biggest problems we faced. And they should be active in ensuring that such conversations range beyond academic circles. With some occasional and spectacular exceptions, in Australia, I think, the social side of the sciences haven't yet punched their weight in terms of their impact on public policy. By launching a Deakin Policy Forum, we hope to make a modest, or even better than modest, corrective contribution. The forums that we will hold seek to fill gaps in policy debate and provide bridges between ideas communities, interested observers, and those who make or administer policy. We want to invite and broker debate, especially when policy stagnations or over-esteemed orthodoxies enjoy prominence for too long. But to set the scene further and to introduce our speakers for today, let me now hand over to Michael Porter. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, David, and thank you all. You are an invited group, a deliberately diverse group. I'd also like to thank Jane Den Hollander, the Vice-Chancellor. It's great to be in a very well-administered university. And to Pasquale Scro, who is the Associate Dean Research, an old friend, who sort of was a trigger for this event. I'd also like to remark on the historical context for the Deakin Policy Forum, and then introduce our top team, Judy Sloan and Henry Ergas, who I had with my rhubarb this morning in the Australian. But first I should note my belief that Alfred Deakin has always been supporting the think tank business from on high. Indeed, back in the 1980s, I found out some years back, it was his grandson Alfred Brooks who helped me put together a think tank at Monash. Alfred behind the scenes had of course been the first director of the Australian Security Intelligence Service. He knew how to do things without people knowing. And one of them was help me and Greg Lindsay and others put think tanks together. Jim Carlton was involved in that too. And so Alfred Deakin, I think, for his sins on protectionism and debates with Reid, has retrieved his position, and today is just another step in the Deakin family contribution to the level of debate. I think Paul Kelly said that Alfred Deakin had been Australia's greatest Prime Minister. Others have made funny remarks about having a policy forum named after Alfred Deakin. Well, to me, it's not a paradox at all. And two of the grandsons and husband of one of the granddaughters have both been actively involved in discussions about this. Of course, he also supported, did Alfred Brooks, the Dollar Sweets case, and was involved, therefore, in the rise of people like Costello and the economic debate behind the scenes. Moving forward a century, in the early 1970s, I was very privileged, personally, to see some of the university-based think tanks in Germany who were influencing the economic policy debate in the world for the better at that point. Given the US-Vietnam inflation exported via the fixed exchange rate system, Germany more than most, given the history, hyperinflation, the urgent need to float the Deutschmark. Free trade and capital, yes, but not a single currency area, absent labour and fiscal harmony. How things have changed. Read Judy this morning. How things have changed. We worked very hard at the IMF, I was part of that group, on separating the German currency. And the notion that 20 years later would be plagued by an artificial euro, with Germany sort of leading it, with bedfellows like Greece and Portugal, was of course preposterous. At that stage, the US think tanks were also important, but they were more in foxholes. But they made up for the policy weaknesses in the Republicans and the Democrats, the elephants and the donkeys. Returning to Australia in the early 1970s, there was a new climate for reform. Dunstan and Whitlam were in the ascendants. Economists like Max Corden, here today, were getting through on the need to dump protectionism. The Tariff Board became the Anti-Tariff Board, now the Productivity Commission, of whom there's some very senior representatives here today. Whitlam even institutionalised a think tank, devil's advocacy from the Priorities Review staff inside the Department of PM&C. The Reserve Bank, Aussie Homes and bits of Treasury were also quietly supporting revolutions in ideas. And politicians such as Paul Keating, Bob Hawke, John Howard, Peter Costello, Gareth Evans were in the wings. The times were a-changing. Australia reformed. The best, given we have two Australian journalists here today, reading Peter Harcher's book, as I have been the last few days, from the Sydney Morning Herald. What's it called? Sweet Spot. Australia really is arguably the leading performer in the world of reform and delivery from reform. And that really is a subtext, I think, for today's forum. Australia reformed capital labour markets, trade and state enterprise, health, privatisation, smart financing, regulatory models favouring competition over privilege and monopoly. By the mid-1990s, Australia led in economic reform, and it's been manifest in the last decade. In contrast, European and US regulatory failure have given us the GFC, made in USA, and a debt-driven crisis in some places that has reached a tipping point. Exaggerated perceptions of likely failure of demand gave us an excessive concern with Keynesian stimulus, cf. the fundamentals of regulatory and fiscal reform. The problem of debt and misregulation in Europe is now with us in spades, aggravated by phony harmonisation of currency. If Aussie Holmes were alive and with us today, he'd be saying we need to return to a few simplicities. We don't need airy-fairy research. We need to go back to basics. I see Ian Harper nodding. It's a fantastic time, and so the Deakin policy goal is simple: to reopen doors to an improved policy debate, build on research and expertise, create networks of experience, hold forums, form partnerships, whether the topic be health or wealth, broadband or water, carbon or income tax, uranium leasing or climate change. They're all on our agenda. As ANU Chancellor Gareth Evans, who I only remembered to invite last night, also noted last week, there is a need in universities to adapt to technology, to be part of broader communications processes, while not forgetting that independent and peer reviews are vital. So, our speakers today personify the qualities that I think Gareth is talking about and that I'm talking about. Judy Sloan, both from the University of Melbourne and London School of Economics, has also directed the National Institute of Labour Studies at the critical time in labour market reform. She's had corporate directorships and has just been appointed contributing economics editor of The Australian. It's a marvellous appointment. Judy illuminates wherever she leads. Henry Ergas also writes at high frequency and quality for The Australian, a Monash-linked economics scholar with a strong sense of history. a former senior OECD economics counsellor. Henry has been a huge contributor on some of the toughest economic issues, typically associated with network economics, issues of externalities and governance. So first Judy, then Henry, then over to you. And afterwards, a few of you that might be interested, we want to discuss our own governance, our own structure, and how to make this forum as good as some of the other ones we've seen stimulate policy debate in Australia. Thank you.